After a man's police partner kills him during a drug bust, a man finds out that his partner is part of a group of dead people who escaped judgment. As the man is recruited into an afterlife police department, he must stop his ex-police partner from opening a portal which would bring dead people into the world of the living. A heavy man runs through town, while two people chase after him. A man named Nick Walker aims at him with a gun, but has a car fly at him. However, he's unharmed as he speaks about his backstory. 3 or 4 days ago, Boston police detective Nick digs a hole and hides some wrapped gold in it. He and his partner Bobby Hayes stole gold from a recent drug bust. He hides the dug area with an orange tree. The next morning, Nick is awoken by his wife Julia, who teasingly questions him about the tree. Nick pretends he doesn't know anything. Nick leaves for work at the Boston police station. He meets Bobby and tells him that he buried his gold. Feeling guilt at having the gold, Nick tells Bobby that he's turning it in to evidence. Bobby tries to stop him, telling him that the gold was a gift for them, as they didn't expect it. However, Nick is not persuaded and tells Bobby he's going to give his half up. Suddenly, they leave for another drug bust, as they learn that the leader has been tracked down. With a whole team of detectives, they break into a building. Nick shoots at the dealer's accomplices and chases the leader to the building's top floor. However, the leader escapes, and Nick is unable to catch him. Suddenly, Bobby appears behind Nick. Startled, Nick points his gun at him, but lowers it once he realizes it's Bobby. Bobby tells Nick that he can't let him turn in the gold, but before Nick can say anything, Bobby shoots him. Nick falls a few floors down and is instantly killed. Nick opens his eyes to find that time has frozen around him. He walks around, confused, and is suddenly sucked into a vortex in the sky. Nick suddenly finds himself in an office where he meets Mildred Proctor. She tells him that he is dead and that he has the skills they're looking for in the Rest in Peace Department, or the R.I.P.D. The R.I.P.D. focuses on people called deados who have managed to escape judgment and capture them. Mildred tells him that his contract is for 100 years, but if he agrees to it, she could send him back to Boston. He immediately agrees, but she warns him that he's not going back to Boston to meet Julia. Despite this, Nick agrees and is branded with the R.I.P.D. logo on his chest. When Mildred leaves the room, he follows her, only to find that she is seemingly walking on air. Following her into another room, he sees the holding cells of deados. Mildred leads him to the R.I.P.D. Boston precinct, where all of the greatest officers are. He's assigned as a partner to Roycephus Roy Pulsifer. Roy initially says that he's a one-man show, but at Mildred's insistence, he eventually agrees to partner with Nick. Roy takes Nick to his own funeral, and he watches his friends and family mourn his death. Nick watches as Bobby hugs Julia, pretending to be devastated at his death. Roy tells Nick about his own funeral, where a bunch of coyotes picked his bones clean and dragged him into a cave. Nick chases after Julia, who can't seem to recognize him. He's stopped by Bobby, who doesn't seem to recognize him either, and Nick attacks Bobby. However, he's stopped by other police officers. Heading back to Roy, Roy tells Nick that Julia and Bobby didn't recognize him because he didn't look like himself. Roy explains that it is the universe's ultimate wisdom, which prevents them from revealing themselves to their loved ones. He explains to Nick that if he tries revealing himself, his words will become jumbled. Nick wonders what he looks like, and Roy shows him the ID that the R.I.P.D. gave him. Nick learns that he looks like an elderly Asian man, and Roy is revealed to look like a beautiful blonde woman. Roy takes Nick to a suspected deado, Stanley. While they ride the elevator, Roy shows Nick a soul killer, a weapon used to kill deados. As they reach the apartment, they question Stanley. While they question him, they manage to make him really nervous, and they make Stanley pop. They watch as Stanley mutates, and Nick approaches him to arrest him. However, as he struggles to put the handcuffs on, Stanley suddenly rips the refrigerator door off and throws it at him. Stanley tries to escape and rips his arm off with the handcuff on. Stanley jumps off the building, and Roy jumps on Nick so they can fall down as well. They are able to capture Stanley, and Nick proceeds to hit him with his own arm. Suddenly, Stanley throws up a bunch of gold he swallowed. As Nick observes the gold, Stanley tries to attack him, but Roy is able to shoot him with the R.I.P.D. gun. Nick and Roy get into an argument, as Roy jokes about giving Nick a C+ on this mission. Angered at Roy, Nick throws him in front of a bus, which causes Roy to lose his hat. Returning to the R.I.P.D. headquarters, they book the gold as evidence. They also learn that almost all deados have moved to Boston recently. Nick is suspicious of Stanley and why he was hiding the gold from them. He asks Roy to accompany him in finding out more about the gold. Roy takes Nick to his own informant, Elliot, who is a deado. Nick confronts Elliot, using a gold piece he kept from the evidence. Elliot claims that the gold is worthless. Nick leaves the gold with Elliot, and Roy and Nick leave. However, they wait for Elliot outside, as Nick had planned to give Elliot the gold to see what he did with it. Elliot appears, and Nick notices that Elliot gives the gold to Bobby, his ex-partner. Roy and Nick follow Bobby, who goes to Nick's house. Bobby speaks to Julia, asking her if Nick buried anything before he died. Nick and Roy watch as Bobby digs up the gold that Nick had buried. Roy is immediately skeptical of Nick, asking him for an explanation. However, Nick sees that Julia is disappointed in him and regrets burying the gold. Eventually, he tells Roy that he only buried the gold for money, but didn't know what connection it had to the deados. The two follow Bobby to the airport, where they see him meet a man and give him the suitcase with the gold. They ambush the man, taking him to a nearby freezer at gunpoint. They question the man about the gold, but the man refuses to answer. Nick threatens to pop the deado, but the man decides to pop himself. The man turns into a heavy man and runs away from the two. As they try to capture the man, they cause many accidents on the road. In the end, Nick manages to grab the gold from the deado, but the deado himself manages to escape. Back at headquarters, Mildred reprimands the two for not only exposing humans to deados and leaving a wave of chaos over the city, but also for failing to capture him. She leads them to Eternal Affairs, where they learn that the gold is part of an artifact called Staff of Jericho. The Staff of Jericho reverses the tunnel to the afterlife, making it possible for the dead to come down to Earth. They also learn that they've been suspended from duty and will have to go to a hearing the next day. After that, they will most likely be erased. Panicking that these are his last few hours, Nick visits Julia to try to reveal himself again. At first, it seems like it's working, but Julia eventually dismisses him and runs away. It turns out Roy was watching Nick, and he tries to talk some sense into him. He asks Nick to leave Julia alone and let her heal and move on. Their job is to make sure their loved ones are safe on Earth. Angered, Nick fights with Roy and says some mean things to him. After a while, Nick realizes that he was really mean to Roy and apologizes to him. The two eventually decide to track down the rest of the gold, regardless of their suspensions. Nick suspects that Bobby might be a deado and not just a bagman. Roy theorizes that he could be using a rare kind of artifact that would help him mask his deado energy. Nick realizes Bobby always carried around a charm bracelet. Meanwhile, Bobby meets with another deado and gives him a piece of another silver artifact. The conversation between them shows that they are about to complete the gold for the Staff of Jericho. The next morning, Julia calls Bobby to tell him about the man who had approached her last night. Bobby realizes that it might be Nick, who has become an officer of the R.I.P.D. At the same time, Nick and Roy pull up to Bobby's place. After Roy enters his house, Nick sneaks in through another door. They confront Bobby, who hides a piece of gold with him. He reveals that he is a deado as well. Bobby knows that it is Nick, and Nick orders him to take off the metal from his bracelet. As soon as he takes off the metal, the house begins crumbling. After confiscating the gold, they arrest him and take him back to headquarters. Suspiciously, Bobby doesn't resist. At the headquarters, it's revealed that many other deados have also been caught. It turns out that Bobby and the other deados have planned this. When the vault containing the gold evidence opens, Bobby triggers the artifact, which slows down the R.I.P.D. officers. The deados begin taking back the gold and escape. Roy manages to shoot the artifact, but by then, it is too late. The deados head to the streets, and Bobby informs the heavy deado that all the pieces of gold have been collected. The heavy deado orders the rest of the deados to start assembling the Staff of Jericho. The R.I.P.D. officers head to the world of the living to find the deados, and an intense battle ensues. As the battle continues, a vortex appears in the sky, and Nick and Roy follow Bobby and his gang. However, their way is blocked by the heavy deado and his gang, who don't want them to reach the Commonwealth building, where the artifact is being built. While driving, Nick and Roy are attacked by deados driving cars, but due to falling cars, they're able to escape. It's revealed that Bobby has ordered the deados to bring him Julia, as he plans on using her blood as a sacrifice to complete the building of the Staff of Jericho. As Bobby pops in front of Julia, She is terrified. Meanwhile, Nick and Roy are attacked by the heavy Deado, but using his driving skills, Nick is able to get rid of him. At the roof of the Commonwealth building, Bobby is ready to sacrifice Julia, but Nick and Roy arrive just in time. However, Bobby stabs Julia before they can do anything. A fight ensues between the Deados and the R.I.P.D officers. While they fight, the artifact starts absorbing Julia's blood and is activated. Dead people start pouring from the sky. Roy and Nick start making their way through the Deados. Roy attempts to destroy the artifact, while Nick confronts Bobby. As Nick and Bobby fight, Bobby seems to be winning. Roy thinks of a way to destroy the artifact and uses a bullwhip to pull a truck down to the artifact to destroy it. Nick is able to shoot Bobby in the face after a long, intense battle while he is distracted. Nick runs to Julia, but she seems to be losing a lot of blood. As time stops around them, Julia is finally able to see Nick's true appearance. The two share a moment, and Nick tells Julia that she must move on and continue living. Nick tells Julia that he will always love her and lets her go. Julia wakes up in a hospital, and a doctor, who turns out to be Mildred's living identity, tells Nick that Julia will be okay. As they leave the hospital, Mildred tells Nick and Roy that the Eternal Affairs decided to give Nick a warning, but Roy must face 53 more years of service. Roy is angered, but becomes happy when Mildred gives him his hat back. Nick is given a new identity, a Girl Scout with orthodontic headgear on. Thank you for watching. Be sure to like our channel and subscribe if you enjoy content like this. Also, let us know what movie you would love us to recap for you.